It's amazing what power a single word can hold. Just one word. I remember one word in particular etched into my memory in a way that I will never forget. Can't remember how old I was, but I remember my mom taking the phone downstairs in her house when I was living with my parents. So I was probably like 10 or 9 or something. And I remember her becoming emotional, really emotional on the phone. And so I remember sneaking in the basement closer until I could try to overhear what was going on, but not so close that I would be intruding. And I heard her sobbing on the phone. And she uttered these 2 words. She said, "Oh, Daddy, oh, Daddy, oh, Daddy." She kept saying it over and over, and the sobs just kept increasing. And I realized as she kept talking that her father had called to let her know that her mom had passed away in a minor surgery that shouldn't have had any kind of complications. And to this day, when my daughter Glory calls me Daddy, it does something to me. There was something about my mom reaching across the miles through the phone, like trying to hold on to something in her father across the phone. He lived in California, we were in Winnipeg. That just was etched in my mind in a way I'll never forget. So when she calls me Daddy, and she still does, something in me rises up and this protective heart comes out, just like my mom was looking for those years ago. On the other hand, many of us probably can think of words that defined us, words that changed our lives. You probably, each of you, can think of an insult that was thrown at you, maybe by a friend, maybe by an enemy, but the kind of words that sank in like arrows and just kept digging deeper and deeper. And it's so deep that you've actually developed a kind of a reaction to them, like as if you've got to prove now that that's not true. On the other hand, you've probably been given compliments or expressions of love that have mattered so much to you that you go back there in your memories when you need some encouragement. On the other hand, you can probably think of words you've spoken that you wish you could take back. Things that you've said in anger that you only half meant, but landed deeply in the heart of someone else, regardless of what you meant. And you know it's done damage, you know it wounded, and you know you can't take it back. Or lies that you've spoken in moments of weakness, trying to cover up because you're afraid of the consequences, and then had to cover that with another lie, and cover that with another lie, and you wish you could just go back and take back the first one. Or how about gossip that you've helped propagate about someone else, and you weren't even trying to be destructive, but you watched that word or that description of someone come around and they found out about it and it just devastated them. There are probably people, if you're adults, you can think of that were so hurt by gossip in the playground or in junior high or high school that the trajectory of their lives changed because of those words. Oh, the Bible predictably has a lot to say about what we say. Because God knows better than any of us how much power words hold. One of the craziest things I think the Bible actually says about words comes from the mouth of a guy named James. James was the brother of Jesus. He's one of the apostles. And by the way, this is a really good apologetic or proof that Jesus really was the Son of God. If you can convince your brother that you're the Son of God, you're probably the Son of God. Like, this guy knows you better than anybody else. If James is sold, I'm sold. Right? Really, that's a pretty good proof. But James, he says these incredible words, and I'm going to use the Message translation here. He says, we get it wrong nearly every time we open our mouths. He says, if you could find someone whose speech was perfectly true, you'd have a perfect person in perfect control of life. Now, some of us instantly went, yeah, right? Like, just like, tell me about it. If you could find, and someone else, though, is going, I don't know if I totally believe that. At the same time, you're thinking, I can see how that would be generally true, but that's a pretty strong statement. And it's almost as though James anticipates this wrestling that we're doing, going, I think there's truth to that, but I don't know if it's totally true. And so he keeps going, and he explains what he means. And this is the illustration he uses. He says, when we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal, right? Unless you don't know how to. Yeah, it's a really stubborn horse. Or take ships as an example. Although they're so large and are driven by strong winds, they're steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. In other words, it's got a lot to say about the power that it has. The tongue wields enormous power. He's saying that if you could somehow control your words, you'd have control over the direction of your life. Now this theme runs all the way through Scripture, from Genesis to Revelation, and actually right at the end of the book, there are words about words. It's crazy. And then right at the beginning, in the very beginning, Genesis, like 1 verse 1, we're talking at the very beginning, the creation story. God's Spirit is hovering over the deep, and He's about to create or form the earth around us, the one we live on. And this is how it happened. God said. And then God said, and then God said. God said, let there be light, and there was light. God said, let there be land, and there was land. Let there be a sky, let there be sun, the moon, the stars. God said, God spoke, and it was. Now, what we sometimes forget about the creation story is that it's not just about laying the physical foundations of the earth. God is laying the foundations of the spiritual world as well. Sometimes we take the book of Genesis as though it's a science textbook, and although there are scientific things about it, God is far more concerned that we grab the spiritual significance of what that's about. So here's God laying the DNA, the foundations of reality itself, and He's using words. He could have used anything, but He used words to do it. Here are the cosmos themselves responsive to the words that God is speaking. And then He creates human beings, Adam and Eve, and the first thing He gets them to do is talk. He gets them to name the animals, joining Him in this creative process. The problem is that very shortly after God set the foundations of the world as responsive to words, the power of words in the cosmos, we sinned and screwed it all up, and sin spread like a cancer through everything, including words in general, so that everything kind of now goes to pot on the words that we speak. So this is what James says next, and this is really graphic when you think about it. Now, I need to point this out. I planned this sermon series 3 months ago, at least, not knowing what would be happening up north this week. And I by no means want to cheapen the devastation that's been happening in Fort McMurray by using this passage, but this is not a coincidence. We have in our world today, in our lives today, as graphic an illustration of what James is talking about as we will probably get in our lifetimes, Lord willing. So listen to this. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue is also a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. Could not be more blunt than that. James says, you're thinking, okay, we've got this great power. We can steer our lives using our words. He says, yeah, but remember that we've been so corrupted by sin that the tongue tends to, instead of building up our lives, it tends to burn it down. And not just our lives, the lives of others. In fact, you probably save your nicest words for people outside your family, right? We're generally nicest to people that we work with, or the acquaintances, the people that we don't have to have patience for. And then we unload hell, literally, on the people closest to us, our friends, our family, the ones we know who are supposed to forgive us. James says, you know how this works. You know what devastation you can cause. You know how a tiny spark of a word or a concept or an insult or a blessing can have a mammoth effect and a trickle effect on people's lives. You know how this works. And that's not even the bad news. That's not even the bad news. Here's the bad news. I'm a geek. That's not the bad news. It's just, that was couldn't think of, okay, next, moving on. Listen to this. This is the power of your tongue, can be set itself on fire by hell, and all these, it goes to pot and everything's like nuked, right? And then he says, all kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind, but no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. Now we can bite our tongues. We can rein in our tongues. We can decide not to say things here and there. We can exert a measure of control over our words. But James says you pay attention to your life. You watch it and you will see this, and it is absolutely true. You cannot tame it. You can control yourself in different situations, but you will never tame your tongue. It's impossible. Now, going back to verse 2, you're thinking, didn't he say, though, in the beginning, that if you could find a person who could control their tongue, you'd have a perfect person in perfect control of your life? Yes, if you could find that person. But he says, you're not gonna find that person, because you cannot tame your tongue. We try our best. We do. Most people try to be careful with their words. Some people truly don't, but most of us here, I'm sure everyone here, tries to use their tongues for good and not evil. And we're so good, aren't we? We're so good. We bless people, we're encouraging, and then we get home from work and we just rip someone a new one, and all over the place. We're thinking, oh, I just relapsed, I'm so sorry, God. And then we apologize and we ask for his forgiveness. Please, God, fill me with your spirit. And then we do, boom, and we do it again. And then we speak when we should be silent, and we're silent when we should speak. And it's like this tongue of ours, it's got a mind of its own. Have you ever found yourself wondering, where did that come from? Or you say something vicious and you go, I didn't mean it. Well, then why'd you say it? James says, this tongue thing, it's like it's got a life of its own, and you're never going to quite tame it. It's just, you can't. It is not possible to tame. I learned this the hard way in one of my first years of college, when I went on my only blind date in my entire life. There's some friends of mine thought this girl would be great for me, and so they set up this date, whatever. I was super lonely, so I went to this date, not knowing what to expect. Is she cute? Oh yeah, she's cute. Okay. So I decided, I know I'm shallow. I went to say it, and I'm so mature now. So I got there early, because this is why I'm not late to things. I'm early to things generally. So I got there early, and I was sitting kind of waiting for our table, and she walked in, and she could tell, that no one says a word, but someone's looking awkwardly for someone. So I knew it was her, and I have to confess, the moment I saw her, I went, nope. And it wasn't just the way she wasn't bad looking at all. It wasn't that. It was just, there's something about the way she carried herself, just nope. And introduced herself, nope, 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 nope. And I was the whole evening to nope. But she was thrilled. She was so excited that we had met, and wow, I can't believe this must be God. I'm thinking, I'm not sure, but I'm trying to be polite. And so the end of the evening comes, and of course, you're wondering, what's going to happen and how you're going to end this conversation. And so the whole night I'm going, nope, 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 nope. Hey, do you want to get together again? Sure. So then, I could still technically, I won't call her, I'll wait for her to call me. I could still turn her down, So she calls again, and hey, nope, 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 nope. You want to take me to grad? Yeah. Ugh, I seriously did this. So Shauna knows me. Part of it is I find it hard to say no, and I'm polite from my mother. This comes from my mother. It's her fault on Mother's Day. I'm throwing her under the bus. Thanks, Mom. She's so polite. So I went to grad with her, and then I finally did. I went, no, that's it. I didn't say nope, but I said I cannot keep doing this. So when James says, hey, if you could find someone in perfect control of their tongue, you'd have a perfect person in perfect control of their life. That is great in theory, but we all know we have moments where we can control our tongue, but you can never truly tame it. So, does that mean our language and how we use our language is just hopeless? No. Because of the next insight. Here's the next one. The next insight that James is going to share with us. And this is powerful. It takes a little bit. You may not see it right away, but once you see it, you won't unsee it. All right? So the next little bit. Oh, there's that. Sorry, I'm getting so excited. I'm behind my... So here's the next part of the passage. He says, with the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. Can both fresh water and salt water flow from the same spring? Brothers and sisters, can a fig tree bear olives? Can a grapevine bear figs? Neither can a salt spring produce fresh water. Here's the principle. Both good and evil might come out of my mouth, but they are not coming from the same source. Both good and evil might come out of my mouth, but they are not coming from the same place. This verse says they can't be. When you are speaking in a way that tears people down, or when all negative words, awful words, destructive words, dirty words are coming out of your mouth, that's coming from a different place than when you speak words that build up and encourage and change the world for the better. Your mouth is just the place, it's like the fountain for the sprinkler. It's not where the tap is connected to. Here's how he unpacks that concept. Who is wise? These are the very next words. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, don't boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. Here, we're learning something about what words are. Here's the simplest way that I can think to put it. Words are ideas trying to become real. Words are ideas trying to take on flesh in the real world, and the moment we say them, they're a half step away from becoming an action or actually taking on flesh in the world. That's what words are for. They're ideas trying to become real. And every word that we speak, you know what I mean by that, is either manifesting wisdom from heaven or wisdom from hell. You're either taking ideas sourced in darkness and giving them a voice and helping them move along the spectrum to becoming flesh in the world, or you're taking ideas and wisdom from God and speaking them as a way of them starting to take on flesh in the world. And here I don't mean that all we have to do is speak something that becomes reality. I'm not talking about that word faith kind of idea. That's not what I'm talking about. But you can see this here. When you see all kinds of gross stuff manifest, it's because we've been drawing on wisdom from the wrong place and we're giving it a voice, and now we've got to live with it. And the opposite is also true. Now, the words we speak either manifest the atmosphere of heaven or the atmosphere of hell. And you know this to be true in your life. Have you ever come home from work in a good mood? Or maybe you're the one at home and you've had a perfectly good day, and your spouse or your child or someone comes into the home and starts speaking words, and you can literally feel the atmosphere shift. Whether you believe in God or not, you know this is true. Our words change the atmosphere. They do. Now, I've used this image before, not this picture, but this metaphor, that what God is doing and what Satan is doing in the world is terraforming. We live in this physical world, but in the spiritual world, there are two sources of wisdom, there are two sources of ideas, two sources of power, and these kingdoms are trying to manifest on earth. God is trying to terraform earth for his purposes, using our words and our actions, our ideas, so that we create the atmosphere of heaven around us. So this is being salt, this is being light, this is showing people the love of God, this is praying for healing, this is blessing people, encouraging people, enfolding people in our arms. This is creating the atmosphere and the culture of heaven so that God can have his way, the kingdom come, his will be done. But the enemy is doing exactly the same thing. And when we speak words that are sourced in the wrong place, we are speaking into the world a culture that eventually shapes the atmosphere around us, and then that other world can thrive. This is what terraforming is. Terraforming is using the resources of one world to recreate its atmosphere in another. This is what's at stake with our words. And God and Satan are at this all the time. And words, according to James, are central to this. Now, I've told you that words are powerful. I've said that if you could find someone that can control their words, you'd have a perfect person, perfect life. But you're never going to find that person because you can never tame the tongue. I've said now that both God and Satan are trying to manifest the wisdom of their kingdoms here on earth so that we experience the reality of that kingdom here and now. So how does this help if we can't tame our tongues? This is what comes next. When we go back to the beginning of this message, you'll remember the rider analogy, the ship analogy with the rudder. Has it ever occurred to you that the message of this passage is not You better control your words. The message is actually, you can't, but someone is. You are the ship, and your tongue is the rudder, but who's the pilot? You're the horse, and the bit's been put into your mouth, but who's the rider? That's the question. In fact, the verse actually says we put bits into the mouths of horses so that we can control them. Has it ever occurred to you that one of the reasons you've got a tongue is this so God can exert influence and control you in a healthy sense, so that he can steer you, the ship of your life, where you need to go, so you don't shipwreck yourself? This is huge, huge, huge. We see then that the rider or the captain, whoever is driving the boat or driving the horse, is the source of where those words are coming from. So you can tell who's on in the driver's seat in your life by what comes out of your mouth. Because whoever has your tongue has you and me. Does this make sense? We've already seen what happens when the enemy's driving. The tongue is a fire in a world of evil among the parts of the body. It sets the course of your life on fire. Itself is set on fire by hell. That's what happens when the enemy is taking control of your tongue. But what would it look like for Jesus to drive the bus? What would it look like for Jesus to steer the ship? What would it look like for Jesus to be the rider to take you where you want it to go? What would it look like to have a tongue set on fire by heaven? To speak words that set heavenly fires across the face of the earth. We don't even have to guess. This happened in Acts chapter 2. So when the Holy Spirit, after Jesus' death and resurrection, is sent upon his people to fill them and bring them under submission to Jesus and empower them with his power, there's a sound like a mighty rushing wind as the Spirit comes upon these people as they're praying. And then the Spirit of God manifests. How? With tongues of fire above their heads. Because their tongues had been set ablaze by the Spirit of God. And then what happened next? Peter got up, and all the other people got up that had been filled with the Spirit. And look, they spoke in other tongues. Now, I'm not going for the charismatic point today. What I'm after is that when the Spirit of God comes upon a person, it changes what comes out of your mouth. It just does. This is what he does. He changes what comes out of your mouth by changing what's in your heart so that you can begin to manifest a different kingdom than you've been manifesting. This happens in the book of Acts. So these disciples are filled with the Spirit of God, and literally their tongues are set ablaze for God's glory and for his kingdom, and they begin to speak in different ways than they've ever spoken before. Peter preaches a sermon, and 3,000 people get saved. And then what happens next? These people begin to collect into groups and home groups, and they start taking care of each other, and they start, looking out for the poor, and they start supporting each other and selling stuff so that someone who's poor has what they need. They start feeding the hungry, healing the sick, and literally the culture of heaven begins to grow because the Spirit of God was changing, first and foremost, what was in their hearts so that it would change what was coming out of their mouths. Can I get an amen to that? I'm feeling a little naked up here. I know that this is a really, I know this is a really hard-hitting message, but can you sense the power of this? So I'm asking you today, will you give Jesus your tongue? No, you need to know, this means you're giving him control of your life. This is what we learned today. By giving him your tongue, you're saying, I'm giving you the ability to steer me. I'm giving you the ability to rein me in with the bit that you've placed in my mouth and take me where I should go. But if you are committed to seeing more of heaven manifest on earth, love and peace and joy and patience and goodness and all of those virtues that we all long for, the best way to do it is to give Jesus your tongue and to let him change what comes out of your mouth to begin with.